Welcome to Bandit's Keep. I'm Daniel. So if you've been following my other channel, there's a link in the description, where I do a lot of actual plays. I've been doing a lot of solo play in the last year and a half or so. And one aspect of playing solo that a lot of people use are random tables, of course, but also things called spark tables. And these are designed to kind of answer questions in a way, right? They inspire you to figure out the answer of a question. And I was watching a video on Chocolips the other day, I'll put a link below, where they were reviewing a product or going over a product. I forget what it is now. I should have written it down, but if you've watched my videos before, you know I never write anything down. But anyways, they kind of mentioned that the spark tables in this particular adventure or setting guide were great because they were really specific to that adventure / setting guide. And this is an interesting idea, right? That kind of, it's like, yeah, of course, why wouldn't your spark tables be specific? But if you make something like Mythic GM emulator that everybody is using, then for any kind of thing, for sci-fi, for action, for fantasy, for high fantasy, low fantasy, middle fantasy, right? Your spark tables need to be generic. And generic is fine because, of course, we can be creative, but specific spark tables can be even better. And what's funny is there's something called, and I'm not sponsored by any of this stuff, but GM emulation deck, I think it's called. And I have a couple of them, and they actually do it by genre. But I just got the sci-fi one because I was going to do some Traveler. And as I flipped through some of the spark table ideas, I thought, none of this will work for my Traveler game. They're cool, there are things, but there's like, they're generic, right? There's stuff that's kind of Star Wars-y, there's stuff that's kind of this, but none of it is exactly what I was thinking. And so I thought to myself, well, maybe much like random tables, making your own spark tables is the way to go. And I kind of have in my head the way I would do it. I would love to get some conversation going on here. Comment below if you have have some ideas about this. But basically, I thought if I was making a spark table, so generally for people who don't know, you've got a kind of an action, if you will, or let's say a verb, and a noun, if you want to think of it that way. And you put them together to create something. And it might be something like running war, right? And then you're like, well, what does running war mean in the context of what's going on right now? Maybe people are refugees and they're running because there's a war. Maybe the soldiers are charging at us. You kind of think about what's going on in the situation. So I started thinking about if I was going to make my own, what would be kind of a standard way to do it, right? You've got your action and your subject. So I think because I play a lot of fantasy games, and this is what I'm thinking about, if we think about the one thing we've all heard, right? And I don't know if it came from D&D, but that's where I saw it, 5th edition that is, the 3 pillars, right? So your action would be something that falls into one of these pillars, a combat, a social, or an exploration, right? So and I'm going to look over here because I wrote down some notes. Some actions might be, for combat, slay, subdue, heal, dodge, trip, right? These could all be just words we could use, right? For our social, right? We could say argue, agree, laugh, convince. So again, these are kind of generic because I'm just kind of putting them out there. You would think of what's appropriate in your world, right? Maybe if you're doing a modern sci-fi thing in your action of a combat, it might be like shoot, right? I mean, I guess you could shoot with a bow or something too, but anyways. And then finally, exploration would be things like discover or investigate, uncover, reveal. And these would all go into our table. In fact, you probably could make different chunks of the table, right? So you could actually look, okay, we're in an exploration situation, so we're going to look at the exploration table. But I think I would probably mix them up. So you'd maybe have 5 of each of these, or maybe if you're going to have a D20 roll, 5 of each, that's for the D15. Maybe you'd have a total of 20, right? And you could spread it out, or you could have a total of 12 if you want to make it even. And then finally, second, we'd have our subject. So again, here, I'm thinking, what's a noun, right?
A noun's a special kind of word. It's any name you ever heard. I find it quite interesting. A noun's a person, place, or thing.
A noun would be your subject, generally, so it's a person, place, thing, or idea. So again, for a person, you could do king, beggar, merchant, thief, priest. Here is where I think being more specific is actually easier, right? If you could put very specifically, like I put priest here, you could put priest of the god of blah, blah, blah for your world. Or you could say, whatever, a thief could be, a certain kind of bandit, or maybe an actual Thieves Guild or, depending on your world. And you could basically do that, right? In your places, obviously you could put generic places, which again already exist in some of these tables, but maybe not the way you want it. You could put castle, ruin, field, whatever, but you could also put very specific things to your world, right? The obelisk of the blah, blah, blah on the edge of the such and such sea. And you could put these places in there, right? And then, of course, our things can be, ancient sword, pirate ship, right? Treasure, a lost map. These are things, right? And of course, ideas would be things like freedom, equality, tyranny, maybe faith, right? These are ideas. So when we're rolling on this, like if I'm just going to look randomly and say, argue, treasure, that could be, okay, what does that mean? Maybe it's unclear. People argued about whether or not this map was accurate, or maybe the treasure was something that was contested and that's why it was buried. So again, you can use this. And if that works in your world, because you're running like a pirate campaign, that works. So I think much like making our random tables, we can make these Spark tables to just suit our own world. And you can figure out how you want to do it. Like I said, you could probably have, since we have 3 pillars at the beginning, you could roll like a D3 to see which one you roll on and then put like 6 in each one or something like that. Or you could roll, the other ones as 4. You could do a D4 and put 6 in each one or 5 in each one and do a D20 roll. And you could kind of mix these up to make them your own so that you're not just looking at these generic Spark tables. Now, if you're thinking, well, I have no idea what I would use, maybe pick up something like Mythic or maybe something free and see what they use, and then just start crossing off the ones that just don't seem like they make any sense in your campaign, and then replace those with things that do. So if you don't have the Force, let's say like in my sci-fi campaign, but I do have underground psionics, then that's what it would be, right? Psionic Institute or something instead of the Force or that kind of thing. Or, mind manipulation, drugs. Or now, of course, if I was just using those cards at the table and I pulled out the Force and the Force doesn't exist in my game, but Psionic Institute does, I can just right on the spot flip it over, But at the same time, you're causing yourself to have to do more mental acrobatics. So by just having it on the Spark table to start with, I think is useful. The other great thing about it is that this is a form of world building. If you sit down and give yourself, think about it, in my world, in the place that I'm playing, if I'm trying to be inspired, what are 6 words that inspire me about combat? What are 6 words that inspire me about social? What are 6 words that inspire me about exploration? And these things should and can change, right? Maybe as the party increases in levels, the combat becomes more about large-scale warfare. So now those combat ideas change, right? Now they're companies of soldiers, naval ships, these kind of things, catapult, right? As opposed to sword, right? And basically we can change these tables as we go to change the campaign. In fact, you could even have different tables for different parts of your world if you want to get that much into it. But I wouldn't sit down and make a ton of them to start with. Create one that seems to fit your world. Now you might be listening to this and saying, I don't play solo, so why would I ever use this? But if you're running a game and you are, improvising, as we all end up doing occasionally, or even building an adventure ahead of time and you want to kind of get inspired, again, instead of looking randomly online, you could actually look at your own table and roll on it to give yourself a little bit of an idea to move forward. Oftentimes at the table, I'll actually use the card deck from Tales of Argosa, which has a bunch of words and pictures on it. And I think using something like this that's custom to my own table might be even better when I'm playing with my group. So that's what I'm going to work on next. I'm going to see if I can whip up a few tables from my group, and maybe I'll report back at some point. But I would love to hear from you if you use Spark tables, if you play solo, if you play with groups, you play GM-less is another way that people use a lot of these tables. And do you think they're useful? Let me know. If you want to hear more about how I handle just random tables in general, check out the video in the card up here, and I'll talk to you soon.